Seated. The trouble with Good Friday sermons is that preachers, especially this one, think we're supposed to explain things. We think it's our job to clarify the story, solve the gospel mystery even. To be honest, it can feel impossible at times to heed Rilke's seemingly gentle advice to be patient with all that is unsolved in your heart. Why bother with a sermon if it solves nothing? But on Good Friday, nothing is solved. Nothing is resolved. If anything, it's a day on which we try to stay present to the world, even as we watch that world come entirely undone. Innocence is executed. Goodness breathes its last. Violence claims yet another Prince of Peace. It is finished. All of it. Even if the season is wrong, a few lines from a Welsh priest named R.S. Thomas come to mind. Be it sufficient that in a church porch on an evening in winter, the moon rising, the frost sharp, he was driven to his knees, and for no reason he knew. He had no power to pray. His back turned on the interior, he looked out on a universe that was without knowledge of him, and kept his place there for an hour on that lean threshold, neither outside nor in. At least today, that's what patience toward all that's unsolved looks like, or maybe feels like to me. Keeping one's place for an hour on this lean threshold, neither outside nor in, a universe that seems to be without knowledge of us, a universe that does not seem to care. Perhaps Good Friday is at least a day for training the soul to sit still before it rushes on into an answer or a resolution. My wife Ardell once said, "That person doesn't seem to be able to sit with discomfort for very long." She could have been talking about me, of course. I know the damage I can do when the primary motivation for my action is a need to alleviate my own discomfort. What's the old saying? Do something, even if it's wrong. Well, that's what passes for wisdom to fools who have not learned to keep still in their discomfort. Fools like me, who'd rather do anything sometimes other than keep his place on that lean threshold long enough to discern what the world outside my head might actually need from me. I don't mean to say that Good Friday is primarily an exercise in self-help. But Jesus did teach us that there are real connections between the hatred and objectification and vengefulness that swirl around inside each of us and the all too real damage done by adulterous lovers and outright murderers in the world. Murders made of the same stuff of anger as anger, he said. Infidelities made of ordinary objectifying lust. The external harm arises from wounds within that we don't know how to be patient with. Hurts we don't know how to stop picking at, long enough for them to at least begin the process of healing. The resolution Jesus refuses most directly on Good Friday is the resolution of violence. It's probably safe to say just about every act of human violence ever committed, from playground fistfights to carpet bombing campaigns, was carried out by people who believed they were resolving something. And Jesus taught and lived and died for the truth that violence resolves nothing, and that violence has been ricocheting back and forth between our lives almost from the beginning. It won't stop until we find a way to stop it in ourselves, he said. And so on Good Friday, that's what he did. He stayed on the lean threshold of a universe that seemed without knowledge of him, and he refused to send any of its violence back out into it. It's a blasphemous irony that Christians across the centuries let the violence in the Passion narrative fire up violence in themselves against Jews. Good Friday pogroms and lynchings are part of our history that we've got to continue to reckon with and repent of. We must be clear. They're instances of the evil that produced a dark day like this one, not actions it's ever called any of us to carry it out or condone. But how do we keep the violence from passing through us in all of its forms? Like that man on the porch, there are days when we too may feel that we have no power to pray. But we do. Prayers for the world are precisely what the church has handed down to us in this liturgy. All manner of prayers. Prayers for the nations and for the peoples of the earth. Prayers for the suffering. Prayers for the afflicted. Prayers for lives that have known no good news. Prayers for the persecuted. Even prayers for persecutors. In Matthew's telling of the crucifixion, Jesus also praised words that were handed down to him. And he praised them in a moment when his universe was at its coldest. A universe that seemed to him to be emptied of God. In that moment, he prayed the words of a song. My God, why have you forsaken me? Apparently, it's okay to pray, even when you don't think anyone's listening. Jesus did. The prayer he reached for, of course, wasn't a prayer of tidy resolution. It was a cry of dereliction, a cry of abandonment. But it's one that had been sung and said for generations by then. So in a sense, even in his feeling of abandonment by God, he wasn't alone. There were others who could at least give him words to say as he tried to be patient with the terrible things that remained unsolved in his heart, in hopes he wouldn't pass the senseless violence he was in the grips of back out into this world he so loved. It's a hope of mine that gets shattered every day, but my hope is still that no one will ever have to endure again the kind of suffering Jesus endured. I believe this is his hope for us too. I also believe the church has handed down usable wisdom to us in asking us to be still for a time with this terrible story in the moment in which it is most unsolved. Perhaps by being here together, by staying put together on this lean threshold, by truly being patient with all that is truly unsolved in our hearts, we can expand our soul's capacity, at least a little, to sit with our discomforts. Maybe we can expand our soul's capacity at least a little to hold pain, whether our own or someone else's. Perhaps we can even expand our soul's capacity when we do suffer violence in a violent world, to at least return a little less of that violence and pain back out into the world than we would have. So friends, say the prayers, whether it feels like anyone's listening or not. Jesus did. Say the prayers, if only to remember that you're not the only one who's ever felt like everything that matters is still unresolved in your heart. Say the prayers as a way to be still. Expand your soul to hold a little more life and hurt, and maybe even somehow to pass back into this world something a little less like violence. Maybe something even a little more like love.